Welcome to the Cat Cave, a Carolina Panthers podcast with your co-hosts Michael Davis and Ryan Frick. Now, whether you're in North or South Carolina or anywhere else in the world, enter the Cat Cave with Ryan and Michael to listen to your favorite Carolina Panthers podcast. Man, we are so excited. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to get ready to get into this Cat Cave podcast, man. It's something new that I haven't done anything specifically like this before. So, yeah, I'm ready to get into it, man. I'm excited for the new venture, and I'm excited for what we can do in the future. So let's get going, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I'm excited too. We got to mention this is part of the Keep Pounding podcast network that the Tobacco Road Sports Radio producer Desmond Johnson is producing now. It's part of the Fans First Sports Network. You can find the Believe in Panthers podcast with Des, Skylar Callahan, and former Panther running back Jonathan Stewart. They released Embrace Debate this past Monday with Cody and Monty. It was pretty intense. I cannot lie. It was a really good episode. You can catch all of that stuff. But the Cat Cave, if anyone's ever heard of a man cave, that's what we want our Panthers fans and viewers to experience. Is you walk into your man cave, you got your TV, hopefully it's 45, 55, 65 inch. You got sports game on, go get you a beverage of some sort, whatever you drink, and get some nachos, get some popcorn, get your snacks, and just chill out and relax. And that is the vibe we are going with this Carolina Panthers podcast, the Cat Cave, and a little bit about us, because Ryan, you're on a couple other shows, aren't you?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're talking about a man cave, it's got to be at least 60. It can't be smaller than a 60-inch TV. But nevertheless, I host a podcast called Tap Outs and Touchdowns where I have two different shows every week. One episode, I will talk about pro wrestling, be it something in the archives and in the past or something current event. So you can check those episodes out on wherever you find podcasts or on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio as part of the Wrestling Wednesdays. And then my football episodes go live on Thursdays where another co-host of mine and I will talk about NFL news. We've been covering the XFL hard this season, and we're going to start picking up the USFL because they're starting this week. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, like I grew up a Carolina Panthers fan. I mean, as far as I can remember, like the Panthers were a new team when old enough to remember football. My first ever football jersey was a Kevin Green Black Panthers jersey. Most of my high school yearbook pictures are me in a Jake Delhomme football jersey. So I'm excited to sort of dive back in and really get back into, some of the heavier covers for Panthers football because they're one of the most intriguing teams in the NFL throughout this offseason. But, check out Tap Outs and Touchdowns. And I know Michael's been a guest on my show, and I've been a guest on both of his shows. Michael, tell everybody what you normally have going on when we're not recording in the Cat Cave, if you will.
Yeah, when we're not going to be in the Cat Cave, I actually just got off the phone with my mother. Shout out to Mama Davis right here.
Mama Davis, let's go.
Mama Davis. She was like, how many pots you got your hand in right now? I got the Cat Cave. You've been on Out of Pocket with Michael Davis, which is covering football, basketball, cover some wrestling sometimes. We've been heavy on the Carolina Panthers as of late because there is so much going on in the organization. And then I have the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast that airs Wednesdays, also on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, where it's a full-blown wrestling podcast for about 45 minutes to an hour. And I'm also a pro wrestling beat writer for Sports Carolina Monthly. And now we're adding on the Cat Cave. And when I was originally approached by the producer Desmond Johnson about doing this, he was like, can you talk about the Panthers for 30 minutes? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, why not? And even though I don't have my allegiances to the Carolina Panthers, I know a lot of people are tuning off right there, but I love and I respect the passion amongst real Panther fans. This isn't going to be a podcast for your casual Panther fan. Like, I want real Panther talk, real Panther listeners on the podcast because we're going to talk about a lot. We're going to talk about some of the history amongst the Panther organization. We're going to be talking about current events, and what better current event that has struck the entire organization and the NFL on the new color scheme. If you have not seen, the Carolina Panthers are changing their blue, which it's only in the NFL where this is like a huge headline. But Ryan, I know you had some heavy thoughts about the Carolina Panthers color scheme this past week on Out of Pocket.
So listen, and I was sort of out of pocket on that because I had it backwards. I thought they were going closer to the old Carolina blue from the 90s and the powder blue, if you will. I'm not sure if that's what you call it, the tealer blue of the mid to late 2000s. Listen, like you said, only in the NFL can a color scheme be a big story. I think part of what differentiates fan bases and what differentiates sports organizations is their ability to sort of make the colors their own. And I think that the color change that they're making now is sort of, I don't know, it's sort of leaning into like the Detroit Lion blue. Like I know it as a, again, so I guess it should be made clear, since you said your allegiances don't lie here. I have my reasons, and there was a while that I didn't follow the Carolina Panthers, so I had to pick another team. And so there's a second team that I root for, and they are the Detroit Lions. And it just so happens that they both wear different shades of blue.
Is blue your favorite color, Ryan?
Actually, no. As a South Carolina fan, garnet and black are my favorite colors. I bleed garnet and black.
Okay, we had. If you guys didn't know, Ryan, big South Carolina guy. I'm not a UNC guy, but I live in North Carolina. Go Duke! And so it's pretty cool to have like a North Carolina guy and a South Carolina guy on a Carolina Panthers podcast, because that's the only team that like unites the two states together.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Carolina Panthers podcast, not a North Carolina, not a South Carolina podcast. This is about the Carolina Panthers. But yeah, no, so getting back to the color thing, I don't know. Like, I don't think it's that big of a deal until you watch them play a team like the Lions and you're wondering who's white, who's blue, because they almost look identical at that point. There's obviously going to be that a distinct difference there, but I mean, it's big news because they're changing. It's sort of like what the Browns and the Bengals did a few years ago. The Browns went into a darker or a certain different color orange that looked like it was almost the Bengals orange. They did it. Other teams have done it to sort of stand out and be more bold and to be able to, again, differentiate themselves from other teams or maybe become similar to other teams. I'm not sure how they wanted to do it, but I don't think it's that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Listen, they could be wearing and nothing wrong with pink. They could be wearing pink uniforms. They could be wearing Seattle Seahawks green. They could be wearing orange. I don't care what color they're wearing. Nobody cares what uniforms they're wearing if they're not losing games, or nobody cares what they're wearing if they're winning games. Like, all they want to see are wins and losses on the field, whether you're a Falcons or a Saints fan or you're a Panthers fan. Nobody, at the end of the day, I'm a uniform junkie. I love different uniform combinations. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they're wearing, as long as they're winning games. You know what I mean?
Now, Ryan, first, I don't think you're reading too much into this, and I think you actually should. But when you mentioned the pink uniforms, my mind immediately went to branding, marketing. The Pink Panther, that could be your new logo. You could, especially during October. I don't know what.
D'Angelo Williams led the charge on that. Former Panthers running back whose mom struggled with breast cancer. He was the one that led the charge for the pink accents. I always wanted to see a pink jersey or jerseys with like the pink outlines on the numbers. I would love to see that. But yeah,
they need to make it happen, especially. And I feel like they've went away from the breast cancer awareness month in October to cover all sorts of cancer, which I'm not opposed to personally, because there are various types of cancer, but that was a big thing. And if I'm not mistaken, D'Angelo Williams got in trouble one year for wearing pink on his jersey to commemorate.
Before they made it before they made it a league-wide initiative, he wore, I think, like pink cleats or pink socks or something like that, and he got fined for it. And that's when he sort of led the charge. And unfortunately, he's been out of the league for a few years, and like you said, they've sort of veered away from just focusing on breast cancer and focus on all cancers, which, it's a fair thing. Cancer's awful with whatever cancer it may be. But it doesn't. The pink stood out when you saw the guys wearing pink towels, pink gloves, pink shoes, and now there's not that visual aid to call it out. So, but I mean, yeah, I would love to see a Panthers in a pink jersey. I wouldn't be opposed to that. My dad was a big Pink Panther guy, so Pink Panthers would have been sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, get your prowling Pink Panther uniform. Now, if we do see the Carolina Panthers come out with official apparel of pink jerseys, Pink Panther, we need some creative,
Yeah, we need compensation. Yeah. If they come out with a pink jersey and it didn't come out until after we had this podcast, we're gonna get compensated for it, brother. We gotta get paid. We're the ones that gave them the idea.
You guys know it. April 11th, Tuesday, 2023. This was the day. If this happens after this, Ryan and myself get just some compensation. We're not asking for
give us some royalties, man.
Just royalties.
I just want to get rid of my student loan debt. Just pay off my student loan debt, and we're good. I don't even need like a consistent royalties. Just pay off my student loans. We good to go.
I want the consistent royalty. I'm not selling myself short. But Ryan, I think you sold short the jersey change, the color change to the Carolina Panthers, because they could have picked any other time to make this happen. But ever since Scott Fitterer came, ever since Frank Reich came into the building, this has been a new Panther organization. This has been an aggressive front office. They went out and got Miles Sanders. They went out and got Adam Thielen. They went up and traded for the number 1 overall pick that we'll get to talk to here later on in this episode. It feels like this was very strategic in the way they did that. This is not the old Carolina Panthers that we're used to seeing. This is a brand new organization. This is a brand new team. And that's why there's so much excitement surrounding the Carolina Panthers right now.
But you think the color has anything to do with that? First of all, you sold my boy Hayden Hurst short. You talked about Adam Thielen. You talked about Miles Sanders. Don't sell my boy Hayden Hurst short. Hayden Hurst is going to be a monster for this offense, whoever gets drafted at quarterback next week. I guess it's next week that the draft is going to be taking place.
It's a couple weeks, yeah.
But I digress. I don't think the color has anything to do with the new regime. I mean, the story has it that they didn't have the right shade of blue, they being Nike, when they first launched their uniforms. And so this is just a correction. And I think that's all it is. Like, sometimes we tend to look into things to be more than what they are. And I mean, I'm not trying to debate you here, but I don't think that this is a sign of a new regime that they're going to change blue. Now they change colors altogether. Like we talked about, I think we talked about this in Out of Pocket. Like if we were the Rams going from yellow and blue to gold and a different shade of blue, that's a change. If we're going from like a black and red color scheme to a yellow and orange color scheme, that's a new regime. That is a product. That is a branding change to allow everyone to know this is not the same Panthers. This is not the same organization. We're an owner removed from Jerry Richardson. We are way past the Cam Newton days and the Ron Rivera days, and even the John Fox days. This is a new regime. I don't think the different shade of blue is an indication that this is a new regime. I think it's as simple as it's a correction. It's sort of a non-story that's turned into a story. You would have some weight to it if they were completely changing the color scheme altogether instead of just like tweaking. Like if you think about the color palette when you're choosing a color on a computer or whatever you're trying to make, and you just slightly change that shade of blue. That's all they did. That's like they moved one little bar just a little bit to make it a different color. That's really all they did.
And apparently it's because Nike didn't have the right color. But I mean, I'm telling you, the timing is interesting. You mentioned the free agency moves. We mentioned Miles Sanders. You mentioned Hayden Hurst. But we got a segment here called the Panthers Newswire. And since you are the Detroit Lions guy, do you want to announce who the Carolina Panthers picked up this week, a former Detroit Lion?
Yeah, Panthers signed a defensive tackle, and forgive me, I'm going to butcher his name, John Penninci. Signed him on April 9th. He retired last offseason after 2 years in the NFL with the Lions. He could potentially be a nice little rotational run stuffer. listen, it was last offseason. It was, I don't know what it is about the Detroit Lions. And as a fan of the Detroit Lions, I don't know what it is that people like to go to Detroit and then decide, I don't want to play football anymore. Barry Sanders retired in his prime. Calvin Johnson retired in his prime rather than go play for another organization where they can go win a championship. This defensive tackle plays for 2 years. Like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to play. I don't want to play anymore. And then, decides to come out of retirement, and play for the Panthers. Listen, it could just be that a lot of players these days get beat up. I don't know if we can attribute it to the fact the lack of two-a-days, because back when they were getting a lot of practice reps in, you saw less of these soft tissue injuries, the hamstrings, even the ligament injuries, the ACLs. Those have increased over the last few years. And so, without talking to this guy, I'm not sure what his mindset was when he did retire. But there's been guys who just felt so beat up coming out of college and into the pros. And I've talked to a guy that was signed as an undrafted free agent by the Panthers as an offensive lineman from the University of South Carolina. I actually went to my high school. And I spoke to him after, I think he got cut from the practice squad. He said that training for the NFL is the most physically enduring and one of the toughest things he's ever had to do. So there are some guys that just get beat up and banged up throughout college and going into the NFL, and they just feel like their body can't take it anymore. And maybe after a year of rest, they decide, you know what, I'll give this another shot. And if his contract isn't with the Lions anymore, and he's a free agent, somebody saw something out of him for him to come sign with Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see, because Carolina's strength was their defensive line last year. And so adding a piece that, if nothing more than for depth, you can't really go wrong at this point, because Carolina's trying to build something special here in year one under Frank Reich. And I'm not upset about the signing.
So are you saying it's a new regime that Frank Reich is building for the Carolina Panthers?
Listen, I'm not saying that it's not. What I'm saying is that the color change has nothing to do with the regime. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. I know it's a new era for Carolina football, right? It is a new era. We don't know who the quarterback is going to be. That's something I think we can talk about next week. But it is going to be a new look offense. I mean, you got to think everybody that had anything to do with the offense last year. DJ Moore's gone. Christian McCaffrey traded last season. Deontay Foreman, I believe, signed with Chicago. Matter of fact, 3 or 4 guys that played for Carolina last year are now in Chicago. So, it's going to be a completely new look Carolina Panthers. But color's got nothing to do with it. But
it has a little bit to do with it.
No, man, no.
I mean,
I'll die on this sword if I have to, but the color has nothing to do with the fact that we got a new regime in charge.
You can go ahead and die on that sword. Plenty of opportunities there. But you mentioned John Panensi signed with the Panthers this week. Defensive lineman, could be a rotational run stuffer. That's not the only addition they made on their defense. They signed Eric Rowe a few days ago. He was last played on the Dolphins last year, about 14 games, had 2 sacks, 2 passes defended, played about 60% of the defensive plays for Miami last year. And there's questions whether he could be a nickel cornerback or if he could be a safety along with Xavier Woods, Von Bell. Personally, I'm probably starting Xavier Woods and Von Bell over Mr. Rowe. But there's no reason why it couldn't be like maybe a substitution safety, like a rotation, or could be that nickel or dime cornerback.
I mean, listen, I'd have to go back and look at the exact numbers, but Carolina secondary didn't really scare anybody last year, right? I mean, between
J.C.
injuries,
Horn is, I would say J.C. Horn's scary.
JC, of course, he's a former Gamecock, so of course he's going to be scary.
That
JC,
right
listen,
there.
If you learn nothing from us about this while listening to this podcast, you will know that I am the biggest Gamecock homer you will ever meet. If there is a Gamecock that will sign with the Panthers, I will be willing to talk about him. Hayden Hurst, former Gamecock. JC Horn, former Gamecock. Matter of fact, we had one season with Stephon Gilmore down in Carolina.
Now he's a Cowboy.
Yeah. Now he is. Yeah. So listen, like, they need help in the secondary again, even if it's just a depth move. We've seen so many teams that just fizzle out at the end of the season because guys get banged up and they don't have the depth. I mean, prime example, and I don't know if it's a great example, the San Francisco 49ers last year, they played the NFC Championship game with their fourth string quarterback. And it wasn't even a guy that was signed like weeks prior. And they built depth at the quarterback position, and it still didn't matter because at the end of the season, injuries happen and it's next man up. So regardless of whether he starts, regardless of whether he's a positional fill-in, a nickelback, whatever the case is, anytime you sign a guy that you didn't have before, it's a welcome addition where at the very least it's depth, and it's just a guy that obviously could be probably playing in the USFL this weekend, and instead he's going to go sign and do whatever he needs to do with Carolina. So I'm excited to see what the secondary looks like. J.C. Horn, if he can stay healthy. The rest of these guys you mentioned, I think, again, everything about this Panthers team is setting them up that they could very easily be the favorites to win the NFC South this coming year, and that's obviously before the NFL draft even happens. But signs are showing that this is something to be excited about as long as they make the right pick at number 1.
And that was a perfect segue into.
Oh yeah, man, I'm good. I'm on it, doggone it. I don't play no games.
Ryan's not playing any games. Kind of like the South Carolina Gamecocks aren't playing
any games. This is what we do. Yeah.
But you totally missed that slide. But you'll listen back to it on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and the Keep Pounding Podcast Network and catch that last part. But totally dig your Gamecocks on that one. But they made that excitement with the number 1 overall pick, trading up to either get Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. The organization's been split or hush-hush or throwing smoke screens the entire time. But now there's rumors that Arizona might trade out of number 3. And Ryan, I was thinking about this before we did this episode. And I want to run this by you because if a team is wanting to trade up with Arizona to get to number 3, they like one of these 3 quarterbacks. Okay. So they make the deal with Arizona, go up to 3. Okay. That means your top 3 picks are going to be quarterback with Carolina, Houston at 2, and then whoever trades up to number 3 and swaps picks with Cardinals. Well, if you are so adamantly for your team, for one certain player, and you trade up to 3, and you want to make sure you absolutely get them, are you picking up the phone and at least entertaining a trade with the Panthers to go from whatever spot to 3 and then from 3 to 1? Because Carolina, if they can acquire as many more picks as they already have from the McCaffrey deal, then they could probably still get their guy at 3, especially if it's maybe an Anthony Richardson or if they're just split on these 3 guys.
Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, whoever drafts Anthony Richardson in the top 10 will be out of a job in 4 years. He is an athlete. They're touting him as one of the most athletic quarterbacks to ever come out of the NFL Combine. I'll give you a name that everybody talked about being the best that they've ever seen. Kyle Pitts was the second coming at tight end, a top 10 tight end prospect.
That's tight end. That's a little different than quarterback.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you. The positions are different. But the fact of the matter remains is that Kyle Pitts was this generational tight end. And I've gotten crapped on because of the fact that Kyle Pitts has not lived up to his expectation. And I don't think there's any attribution to Kyle Pitts for not living up. I think he's in a bad organization. He hasn't had a great quarterback either year that he played. And then he missed the back half of last year with an injury that he never came back from. But I digress. People expected Kyle Pitts to be this Pro Bowler. Barely hit 1,000 yards in his rookie year, and that's fine. Most tight ends don't.
He could still be a good tight end, though.
Oh, he could, but he won't do it in Atlanta. The reason I bring that up is that Anthony Richardson is going to be this guy who everybody is excited about his prospects of his athleticism, his arm strength, and this, that, and the other. But if you watch game film, it's easy to throw a ball 60 yards down the field when you got nobody in your face. When he was under pressure at Florida last year, he overthrew. He threw the ball in the dirt. Banker Bill, who's my co-host of my football shows over at Tap House and Touchdowns, is a Florida Gator fan. And he will agree with me 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. that whoever drafts Anthony Richardson in the top 10 will be out of a job in the next 4 years. Now, having said that, the Carolina Panthers, they traded up for number one. It's been rumored for weeks that they traded up for number one in order to be able to trade back because they wanted to see what quarterback they had. They wanted to be in control of the drafts. But before that, prior to that, the rumor was they were going to take Anthony Richardson at 9. So if they do want to roll the dice with Anthony Richardson, it makes sense to trade back to 3 because we both know that Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud are going number 1 and 2, whatever order it takes. I personally believe that Bryce Young is going to be drafted by the Carolina Panthers and Stroud will go to the Texans. But they're going 1 and 2, whoever is there. So if Carolina's willing to fall back to number 3 because they like Anthony Richardson, most of the draft picks that they got in the Christian McCaffrey trade, they'll get right back to trade down to number 3 so that whoever it is that wants to go back to get them can go get their CJ Stroud or their Bryce Young or whoever it is that they want. But the idea to me that Carolina's gone through this so that they can just trade back to 3 is just, I don't know, it's a farce. Like, it makes sense. They want to control. They've interviewed all these quarterbacks. They've worked them out. They've met with all of them. At one point, we thought it was going to be CJ Stroud. Now, Chris Mortensen from ESPN is reporting that it's been Bryce Young the whole time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But whoever trades up to number 3, I don't see a trade going. I think Carolina stays at 1. They get the guy they want, and we move forward with the future of the Carolina Panthers.
Well, I was going to ask Ryan what guy you think is going to be at number 1, but I feel like we could, make a good episode next week. What about, let's say, we sit down, we scout the draft, we scout the entire draft, and come up with our own little 7-round mock draft of the Carolina Panthers next week on the episode and see what you got. See who you got going number 1.
Listen, I've never done a mock draft, but I'll give it a shot for the Cat Cave. We're doing all sorts of new things for the first time ever. Let's do the first ever mock draft for your guy, Bully Rye. And let's do a mock draft next week here on the Cat Cave.
I'll send you some mocks. I'll send you some prospect boards. I'll send you mock draft simulators that work out pretty well. We'll narrow it down, pick one, and we'll come on the air and give our little 7-round mock draft because after number 1, all the attention's on number 1 with the Carolina Panthers pick, but it's what they're going to do in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round as they still have those picks somehow because that McCaffrey trade didn't give them up to Chicago. That's where this team is going to get filled out, and they're going to start hitting all the other holes that they have, which are becoming very minimal right now. But we're going to have to say adios to our Cat fans. And if you are exiting the Cat Cave until next week, you can listen to more content by myself, by Ryan on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel. Go subscribe to that. And if you want more Carolina Panther-centric podcasts, you can subscribe to the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, which is powered by Fans First Sports Network. And we will see you next week in the Cat Cave.